Always abrupt again. Buenos dias. Welcome to Las Weavers, episode 3.
Hola,
And today's
hola.
episode is Taking Up Space y Dejando Ir el Que Diran. And just as a reminder, I am Dr. Sandra Leon Villa and my co-host, Dr. Dulce Lopez.
Hola.
And this is a divinely led podcast. What does that mean? That means that we are not doing edits. We are having a conversation that you get to witness and be a part of. And we hope that this is always divinely led and that you may pick up on gifts that resonate with you and release whatever doesn't serve you. Dulce?
Eso. Thank you so much, Sandra. I appreciate you starting us off, reminding us que este es un podcast que is, natural. We're having a conversation and we bring up topics that we feel resonate with those that are hopefully joining us, coming back, or joining us for the first time. Y la plática de hoy, the title I think is so powerful because it says taking up space y dejando ir el que dirán. And in our cultura, el que dirán is such a huge part of our journey, right? We worry about what are people going to say, cómo nos van a ver, how are they going to judge me? No queremos, for me, what comes up is like, no quiero que piensen que me creo mucho, like ya se van a decir que ya se cree muy, and just these ideas that come up. And I feel like the thing that happens when we worry about el que dirán is that we minimize our power, we shrink who we really are, and we don't allow for our potential to blossom and to come out. So it's a way of kind of hiding from maybe the gifts that we carry también.
Yeah. And I think you said something important, like what comes up for me. So even for anyone who is listening, thinking about what comes up when I hear, ¿qué van a decir? El que dirán. What comes up? Where do you notice that in your body? And just thinking about where it takes you. And I think it's interesting that we've learned to shrink so much. We've normalized shrinking so much in our lives desde niña, since we were little kids, right? We've normalized shrinking so much and people pleasing that sometimes we learn simultaneously, don't be too much.
Yeah. Oh my God. Whew, that hit me. Don't be too much. Porque, sí, in my report cards, it was always like, habla demasiado. Does well in school, pero habla demasiado, talks too much. And I remember even at work, like as a professional, it's like, oh, you're being too loud, or you're being too much, or you can't wear certain things because, again, you have to shrink and fit in like a cajita. But what we're saying in this episode, what we're trying to bring up is, how do we bring ourselves to a point where we feel like we can take up space and let go of el que dirán, just really brushing it off and not allowing that energy to contain and stop us, maybe as it has been in the past. And I was thinking before we logged on, just thinking, what small step can we take to start opening up and saying, I'm going to show up y me vale lo que digan los demás?
I had a conversation with a patient this week that I saw, and I was just thinking about how we self-sabotage, right? In different ways. And for me, like somatic work is really important. So even earlier when I was like, okay, notice what you feel, notice where you feel it in your body. And on the flip side, I think it's important for us to start to notice in our bodies what it feels like when we start to shrink. What does it feel like cuando me estoy encogiendo? What does it feel like when I feel like I'm being too much and I'm kind of like, physically shrinking, but also emotionally and physically shrinking, right?
Yes.
Especially as Latinas and women of color, we've been taught over and over again these narratives about, not just calladita te ves más bonita, but also staying in our place, not speaking our minds, not being too loud, not being too assertive, not too aggressive, not too whatever.
Right.
And so we're shrinking, but simultaneously we're holding ourselves back.
Yes.
And for me, it was really important to start thinking about how am I keeping how am I sabotaging my own growth? How am I sabotaging my potential?
Oof.
And that goes well beyond our professional work. It goes
Claro.
well beyond, what we think we deem as successful or what it means to succeed. It really starts in la familia, right? And
Mhm.
one of the things that comes up for me with El Que Diran are the messaging that we get from different areas in our lives, particularly la familia, but
Mhm.
also religion for a lot of us who grew up with these moral guidelines of what it means to be a mujer, what it means to be, um, you know, pure or good or whatever the case is, and how we've just been taught to shrink in so many ways.
And that's so challenging because, like you're saying, it's in different areas. Es con la familia, es en la religión, es con amistades. And so what happens is we spend our energy and time concerned about how others are going to view us or their opinions of us or how they're going to connect with us.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we step up into who we truly are, when we take up space in our essence of who we are, then what I've noticed es que voy a empezar a traer, I'm going to start attracting the people that are going to then say, hells yeah, girl, that's the part of you that I know and I see, and I want to highlight it. Entonces, eso es el poder in when we step up, even if it's just a little bit, right? But when we do that, entonces nuestra energía, our energy then starts shifting, and then we start resonating with folks that are doing the same thing, that are saying, you know what? Tengo miedo. I'm a little scared to do X, Y, and Z, but you know what? I'm going to do it anyway. And then those people are going to encourage us to continue to step up, to continue to let go of el que dirán. And we will see ourselves through the eyes and the lens of those people that are really encouraging us. And we're doing the same for them. Y ahí está el poder, ¿no? De que ya dejamos ir la visión. We let go of the vision of the ones we're concerned about, or we're worried that they're going to say we're too much, or we're concerned that they're going to think we que nos vamos a creer mucho. But then we start shifting our energy to those that will highlight the light that we carry.
Yes. And when we're able to let go, we're doing that because we're choosing ourselves. The more we choose ourselves, the more authentic we become. The more that when we're letting go of what people are going to say, de lo que va a decir la gente, then we're simultaneously saying, I'm choosing me.
Yeah.
And I think about the many blockages that we put in our paths ourselves, right? That's what self-sabotage is. Like, what am I blocking by shrinking? What am I blocking by staying? And I've never really talked about this like in depth on social media, but I grew up very religious. Like, my parents were like Pentecostal Christian. They went to church 3 times a week, twice on Sunday. Like, it was a lot. Like, it was excessive, right? And so then church and Christianity in the form of white Christianity had a big influence on el que dirán, right? Because there in la familia and within the context of religion is where I learned what it means to be what's shameful for a woman, what is ungodly for a woman, what is immoral for a woman, right? And so a lot of these messaging that we're getting, including in la familia, right? Because we know Marianismo is fully influenced by religion. And so when I think about my past and what I was blocking, I overstayed in a very unhealthy relationship for a really long time. And initially, getting into that relationship because I was a single mom, right? Y el que dirán, like, I'm experiencing shame, I'm experiencing guilt. Necesito una intact family, right? And then getting into a toxic or unhealthy relationship where my intuition, my inner being, maybe my innate wisdom was telling me it's time to go.
Yes.
Pero what is my family going to say? Now I have a second child. I've only been married for 4 years. ¿Qué va a decir mi familia, right? Like, I stayed almost 11 years. And as soon as I chose myself, I released everything I was unblocking.
Oh my God.
And within the last 3 years, I have done things that I didn't think I was going to be doing today, right? And those things lead to other things, right? So because I'm blocking myself in this unhealthy relationship, I and now choose myself. I've now unleashed a potential growth and to attract the things that you were talking about, to attract the things that are in alignment. Because when I'm staying in an unhealthy situation, I'm not aligned.
Yes.
I'm not in alignment. So when I get that alignment, now things are coming towards me because I'm walking in right relationship. I'm walking in alignment with my values. And so often we compromise ourselves.
So much. So much. Thank you so much for sharing, Dr. Sandra. It really, it gave me goosebumps. It made me just really, it resonated with my corazón, because I think you're tapping into something so, so, so powerful, especially as mujeres. No, we have this idea of how the shoulds, right? And you're sharing something so huge in that you said, as soon as you said, ¿sabes qué? Me vale, me voy a escoger yo, I'm going to choose myself. And then you see all the changes that happen, all the ways that you have opened up doors that you never even imagined. And opportunities that you're like, que a veces me imagino que te quedas de a 6. like how?
Yeah, and even visions that we had for years, right? Coming into fruition so quickly that you're like, oh my God, I thought about this years ago, and now it's coming into fruition. And so that we think that, oh, well, this is alignment in relationships. This is alignment here. This is choosing myself, right? El que dirán in my marriage, el que dirán acá. But the truth is it's all connected because alignment is alignment is alignment.
That's right. That's right. And as you stated, the more we choose ourselves, because what happens is there's this idea de que si nos escogemos, if we choose ourselves, we're being selfish. No estás pensando en los demás, pero tienes familia. What about this? What about that? But truly, ¿mande?
What about your kids?
What about your kids? Claro. But truly, when you choose yourself, if anything, you're choosing all these relationships, because the more you're in alignment with who you are, the more you're going to show up authentically with your children, with your friends, in your work environment. Y nuestra energía va a cambiar bastante, right? Our energy shifts because we're in alignment, because we're more in tune and attuned to our own intuition and guidance. And we listen to that voice that has been calling us all along. Hey, I'm here. I've been waiting for you. Pero como que tenías miedo, and it's okay. It's time. And so that's the message that I kept thinking when we're going to talk about this particular plática, is about taking up space and being like, you know what? It's time. It's time. It is our time. And especially right now, basado durante la pandemia, we all had to stop. We all had to go inward and really assess and be faced with our mortality. We're not going to be here forever. So, ¿qué estás haciendo con tu vida? What are you doing with your life? And so I believe that Mother Earth was like, aquí llegó chiquitita, ya, you all got to stop. ¿Qué están haciendo conmigo? What are you doing with me, right?
No tienen tiempo para sentarse con sus emociones, ahí les va, cabrones.
Boom, that. It's like, I'm going to make you stop because y'all have been going, and you haven't reflected. And so because we had to, a lot of shifts happen. Con dolor, obvio. Yes, there's pain. But I always say that sometimes we have to break open through that pain, because from that comes our strength. And so we're taking up space in that way. And people made decisions to end relationships, leave jobs, or seek new career paths. And so this time period, I really feel is potent for transmutation in this very deep and spiritual way.
Absolutely. And I hear a lot of healing in what you're saying, right? Like there's a whole healing process. And with a lot of things that are easier said than done, choosing yourself is hard. Like
Claro.
choosing yourself means that there's all these other processes happening underneath that, right? Because for me to choose myself, I need to be doing inner child healing. For me to choose myself, I need to be reparenting my child and showing her it's
Mm,
safe, showing her that I'm going to protect her from this person who is harmful, protect her from the situation that is harmful, and
right.
even protect her from the ideas that I think that people are going to judge me or the need to people please. And
Yes.
so the more we learn to choose ourselves, to reparent ourselves,
Mm,
then the more we show up fully,
mhm,
the more
mhm.
we're able to take up space physically, pero también in terms of our identity and who we are, we learn who we are.
That's
Because
right.
we know who we are, we no longer are as influenced by el que dirán.
That's right. That's right. And as we step into that, then these opportunities, these people, these books, these, all these things start opening up that sometimes maybe were an idea or a thought, pero como que nos daba miedo. And so we would stop ourselves, ¿no? Como estamos diciendo, the more we choose ourselves, the more. And so once you como que you start tasting those new waters, you're like, vámonos. And then you just keep saying yes. And it's like a spiral, right? It's like that vortex that we talk about.
And it tastes like liberation, right? Because
Woo!
I think about how
Yes.
when we're afraid to show up fully, when we're afraid to show people who we really are, right? We talked about unmasking in the first episode.
That's right.
And being unmasked is this true self-love. And
Mhm.
at that point, I am able to show up for myself. I am able to choose myself. I am able to know that my tribe is going to be my tribe no matter what. No, and I learned the difference between being authentic and again recognizing when my body or my mind is showing me that I am starting to shrink, right?
Mhm.
Recognizing that again. So it's like this whole process that seems really easy, but it's a whole process. It's
That's
it's
right.
this journey that we're in. Like I didn't start choosing myself. I mean, especially in my relationship, that was what in 2020 that I decided. And people will say, "Oh, it's because of the pandemic." No, it wasn't. It was because you had time to sit with your feelings. You had capitalism has such an impact on keeping us in survival mode.
Claro.
Well, when things shut down, we had no choice and nothing but time to sit with our emotions and who we are and who we've been and the situations we've been in.
And you found the courage to make that choice and that change. So when you start stepping up into who you really are and standing up and showing up, then you feel more courageous and you're filled with that courage, right?
Mhm.
And so it almost feels like you don't have any other choice but to make that decision.
But to choose you,
That's right. That's right.
you don't have any choice but to choose you because eventually you learn that if I choose me, I can't go wrong. If I
Boom.
choose me, I'm going to be a better parent. If I
Mm,
choose me, I'm going to be a better friend. If I choose me, I'm going to be a better whatever. And that's going to translate into how we show up in other spaces that are going to give us opportunities. How do I get past my fear, step into my courage, and just show up? How do I
that's right.
take up space physically? How do I
Mhm,
take up space with my personality?
mhm,
How do I
mhm.
show up? How do
Yeah.
people see me?
And I think that's so important because when you talk about taking up space with our personality, I think again, el que dirán is so correlated with that because as very young children, it's like, quédate callada, siéntate allí, no hagas ruido, don't mess everything up and so forth. And so you're not encouraged to show up and take up space. Unless sometimes it's como de show, because I know that would happen for me. No, es que ella es chistosa, pónganla ahí, and have her, make people laugh or whatever. But so it's this very intertwined sense of figuring out who you are, how you're going to take up space, and it's lifelong. And I think that's the beautiful part of this is de que es de por vida. It's not like, no, pues yeah, I'm taking up space now, yeah, I'm good. Pero es,
Yeah, ya sabes.
it's, it's a continuous thing of of really learning about who you are and allowing for parts of you to die while you're rebirthing these other parts of you.
And nurturing those parts of us that we were taught were undesirable. Because I think about what was coming up when you were talking is, ¿qué dramática eres? Right? Like, you're so sensitive. You're so this. You're so fill in the blank, right?
Claro.
And we learn to experience shame about those parts of us. We learn to associate them with something negative when they're very much a huge part of who we are.
Yes.
The fact that I'm a highly sensitive person was highly criticized, not just growing up, but in my relationships as well, right? Where it's like, you're too sensitive, or like, you cry about everything. I do fucking cry about everything. But now I understand how this is related to my gift. Yes. Now I understand how this is related to my intuition and to what my body is talking to me about. Oh, you're so dramatic. Well, yeah, I'm hella animated when I talk, but that's also what makes me who I am.
That's right.
But we get told to like tone it down. Bájale dos rayitas, right? Like we hear all these messaging. And so when I think about these TikToks, have you seen these TikToks where they're like these familias and they're like Mexican or Latinos, and they have like the little girls playing the drums and the whole family's doing these songs. And I just think like how beautiful for these parents to encourage this child to just show up and be fully who she is. Because from a really young age, she's learning that it's okay for her to take up space.
Yes.
It's okay for you to be who you are exactly and not be afraid of what people are going to say about you. And what would it be like if we all grew up like that?
Yeah.
What would we be today?
That's right. That's right. And it's so awesome as you're saying that, because I think I experienced two parts of that in my life. Like there was parts where like, no, te vamos a llevar a un nuevo lugar, no toques nada, siéntate, quédate calladita. But then there was other parts where we would go to this Peruvian restaurant. I remember it was called Inca in Southern California. And I love dancing and I'm very animated. Y mi mamá me hizo un vestido and she made me go on the stage in this restaurant y empecé a bailar y estaba haciendo like this whole performance. And so I feel like I got a little bit of both, but I didn't just get one. And so because I didn't get just one, internally, I oscillate between, I'm just going to be me, I'm going to show up. And then, no, mejor no, because ¿qué van a decir la gente? So that's a part of, again, getting to know who you are, recognizing yourself, and then little by little shedding that part that doesn't allow you to take up space or to show up as your full authentic self.
Right. Asking ourselves, what am I blocking by not showing up?
Right.
What am I blocking by not being me? And how can we in turn also, right? Like as parents, how do we show up for our children in ways that encourages them to be their fully authentic selves so that they're not questioning that as adults?
Right. Yeah.
How do we ingrain, like, how do we welcome their full personalities without telling them to be less?
Right. Right. And that's the beauty of being a human being, right? That's the beauty of experiencing this earthly journey, is that it's all an experiment. And so I feel like that's something that's coming up for me, as we like to share in this podcast, is we want you to walk away with some regalitos. We want you to walk away with some gifts. So I encourage you, if you're listening to this, to do an experiment. For a couple of days, I invite you to just show up and be yourself, or dress the way you want to dress and not care about los ojos de los demás or what people are going to say. And just notice how your day goes. Notice how that week goes, possibly a month. And then what opens up for you as you show up, and what stops you.
And that requires vulnerability.
Yes.
And so what I was thinking about as you talked was like, what does, and we're all about birthing in this podcast, right? What does my vulnerability birth? When I allow myself to be vulnerable, when I allow myself to show up, when I record and actually post something without thinking, "Guy, what are they going to think about me?" When I show up fully, I'm being vulnerable. And what is that vulnerability birthing for me? When it's opening doors, when it's attracting.
That's right. That's right. Oh my gosh. I've talked about this in another one of our podcasts, but it was so vulnerable for me to get into social media because it's like, ¿qué voy a decir? ¿Qué va a decir la gente? What's going to happen? But I recognize that people, especially one particular plática I did, I was literally bawling on this thing because I was being very vulnerable, sharing my story and how hard it was for me to get these letters after my name. And so many people responded and resonated with that because it tapped into their own experience. And so the more that we do step up into our vulnerability, the more that we're humanizing our experience, we're tapping into each other, and we're shifting the collective. And that's something that we talk a lot about as well. It's like todo el trabajo que hago para mí, like all the hard work is not just for me, but it's for all of us. And so that's a big part of this, experiment is like, look, estás haciendo this hard work. The fact that you're choosing to listen to this podcast is saying, okay, I'm ready to do something different. And how is that going to shift the collective?
Because it's all like, I think about a recipe for alignment. Like the recipe for alignment, right? If we were to say what involves being in alignment, right? It's not just being true to your values, but also being true to your story, to who you are, choosing yourself. And at the same time, like giving yourself this radical love, giving yourself this radical self-acceptance, this radical compassion, right? For the moments where we do and probably still will shrink sometimes. How do I reparent myself in that moment? Because something that's this theme that's come up repeatedly this week is how we talk about inner child healing. But there's inner people inside of us, right? Because my inner mujer of 2019 is not the inner mujer that I have now. And sometimes when we get stuck in these situations, that inner mujer or the inner niña or the inner teenager gets triggered. Yes. And so when I experience this fear response about a situation or something, I need to ask myself, what is this triggering in a past self? What is this triggering in me, in my inner child, in my inner whoever, right? And then doing the work of reparenting and saying, it's okay. I feel you shrinking right now. But how do we show up? How do we choose us? I'm going to keep you safe. How do we just show up? How do we become vulnerable and step into our power?
That's right. Oh my gosh, I love this. When you're talking about this recipe, I'm picturing like a big cauldron and we're, stirring it and we're saying, ponle un poquito de esto, ponle un poquito del otro. And so, yes, there we go. We're dropping it. And so I encourage you all to create your own recipe. What does that look like? How are you going to radically love yourself? What does that look like for you? Because it could be different for each of us. And what is it going to look like to reparent that little niña? Maybe some of you had a beautiful childhood and you're like, no, I'm cool. Okay. And what about your teenage self? What about that teenage self que quería un tipo de tenis, but the parents are like, nah, esos son para cholas. Or, these different things that show up. But it's about making time to go inward and decide and choose yourself over and over and over and have grace for those times that we do worry and we do stop ourselves and we do still shrink ourselves, and being compassionate, right? So I would encourage you to create that cauldron of alignment, como dice la doctora Sandra. Is like, how are we going to show up in that alignment y cómo va a cambiar nuestra vida?
And the last thing I want to add I don't know if it's your last regalito, but my regalito that I want to talk about is how can I also make this reciprocal? How can I encourage those around me to show up fully? How can I support the people that are close to me? How can I support them to show up and take up space too? Because we're mirrors.
That's right.
And what we see in other people, we're able to see in ourselves. Yes. So how can I encourage someone else to also choose them to be vulnerable, to just do it. Así como dice Nike.
Ándale. Sas. So I hope that you all are walking away with some regalitos that you actually are going to put into actionable steps. So aquí no andamos con el witty witty. Esta plática, our podcast is raw and divinely led. And we truly believe that we're being vessels for those that need to hear these palabras. And the way that you can be reciprocal with us is to have your friends, your family listen to our podcast, share it out widely, and have them, have a dialogue about it. Listen to it together and discuss what comes up for you as we're sharing. And what are we going to do? What are you going to do to start walking este camino of stepping up y dejando ir el que dirán?
Yes. How are you going to choose you? Thank you all so much for joining us. And again, share this, like our videos, share the podcast with other people that you think would benefit from it. That is, like Dulce said, our reciprocity. So gracias as always. And we'll see you all on the 22nd next month.
Woohoo!